Canada is a popular choice for many people looking to move to a different country. Its beautiful nature and high standard of living attract hundreds of people every year. In 2022, a record number of 437,180 people made Canada their new home. But Canada, like every other country, has downsides as well as all the positives. Anyone thinking about moving there should know and consider all aspects of living in Canada before making their decision. In this video, we will look why no one wants to live in Canada. Number 1. High cost of living. While Canada offers a high standard of living, it comes with a hefty price tag, especially if you're residing in one of the major cities like Vancouver, Toronto, or Montreal. According to a 2023 survey by Numbeo, Canada ranks as the 22nd most expensive country in the world in terms of cost of living plus rent index. The housing market further exacerbates this issue, followed by the high standard of living, inflation, and high tax rates. According to the Canadian Real Estate Association, via Fortune, the average house price in Canada reached a whopping record of $816,720, around 9 times the average annual wage. In Ontario, this ratio jumps to 10 times the average wage, and in Vancouver, it's a staggering 14 times the average wage. Even everyday expenses, like groceries, can take a toll on your budget. Number 2. Canada has harsh weather. Being such a large country, Canada has a range of climates, so even though the climate is on the cons list, moving to Canada doesn't automatically mean you will spend most of the year in snow-filled areas. There are areas, such as Vancouver Island, that hardly see any snow at all, and the temperature rarely drops below zero. The drawback of these areas is that they tend to get a lot of rain. The further north and inland you go, the longer and more severe the winters get. For example, in the most northern parts of the territory, Nunavut, the temperature can hover around zero even during the summer months. Its neighboring territory, Yukon, is the record holder for the coldest temperature ever recorded in Canada, 63 C in 1947. We could argue whether climate should be on the cons list, since there is so much variation. However, for people moving from other parts of the world, the climate can be challenging, which is why it can be considered a con. Number 3. Traveling through Canada can be difficult. The public transportation system is excellent in big cities. Unfortunately, unless you have a car, it's not as simple to travel within the rest of the country. It can take anywhere from hours to days to travel between major Canadian cities by car, bus, or train. While much of the country's natural beauty is found in its majestic mountain ranges and pristine lakes, those geographic wonders can force you to take a less direct route to your destination. In addition, extremely cold winters often lead to roadblocks and construction projects come spring. That means traveling long distances by car still has its challenges. Number 4. Housing crisis. One of the most pressing issues highlighted by Dom is Canada's housing crisis, which he describes as one of the worst in the world. In the past decade, the average value of a Canadian home has more than doubled, making it nearly impossible for many to buy a home. Even renting is becoming increasingly unaffordable. For instance, in Toronto, residents spend an average of 120% of their income on rent. Meanwhile, buying a property in Vancouver requires an income of at least $250,000 to qualify for a mortgage. This has led to Canada having the highest household debt among G7 countries. Number 5. Long distances. Since Canada is one of the largest countries in the world, the distances are going too long. But it is not as simple as taking a cheap flight across the country. Flights in Canada are costly, and there are no budget airlines like in Europe and other parts of the world. If you like to travel, you may be limited to short road trips within your province, or have to fork out hundreds of dollars for a round-trip flight. The cheapest option for travel is the bus, but that won't suffice if you plan to go from the far west to the far east or vice versa. So you will need to be on the lookout for cheap deals to make it affordable in the long run. Number 6. Government control. While many are unaware of this factor, the Canadian government has a lot of control over your daily life, whether you like it or not. If you ask Canadians, they will mostly tell you that they feel the government's regulations could do with being taken back a notch or 5. For instance, the Canadian government can decide how much trans fat can be in a restaurant meal, or how well a burger can be cooked, which seems outrageous. While things like this might seem okay to some people, it may not be enjoyable if you move from an already uptight country where rules and regulations outweigh the freedom of simple decisions. Number 7. High taxation rates. Canada is among the highest taxed countries in the world and has a tax burden of 33.45%, which ranked 25th across the globe. Canada has higher taxes than the USA despite the personal tax rate in Canada being 33% and the USA 37%, which means that higher earners in the USA pay high taxes. In contrast, the average person in Canada pays a high tax as a standard. Believe it or not, the USA is below average in tax rates, while Canada has one of the highest, which goes towards its free healthcare, social services, education system, and much more. In comparison, Canada collects more tax per capita than the USA, and Americans spend double what Canadians spend on healthcare. Number 8. Slow healthcare. One of the best things about Canada is the free universal healthcare for residents and citizens, which is an incredible factor, especially if moving from the United States, where healthcare is not free. However, one of the most significant disadvantages is that waiting times are incredibly long, since everyone has easy access to doctors and hospitals. This can be very frustrating for people moving to Canada, and many prefer to take out private healthcare, especially if they need surgery, where wait times can be very long. One of the other downsides is that many Canadian doctors go to the USA, where the pay is higher, leaving Canada with a shortage of doctors, with family physician shortages highest in the territories of Quebec and BC. Number 9. Hard to integrate. Canadians are a truly welcoming and friendly nation. Still, while this is a positive trait that is a pro of living in Canada, the truth is it can be hard to integrate into society. Canadians are loyal people who, once they get to know you, will take you under their wing and show immense reliability. But getting to that stage can sometimes be tricky. Getting to know Canadians on the surface is easy, since they love to socialize, whether attending hockey games or drinking craft beer, but finding deep connections can prove tricky. In addition, coworkers generally don't socialize in Canada, while friends don't usually do business together. Number 10. Part of the country is French-speaking. Finally, something to consider when choosing where to live in Canada is that part of the country is French-speaking. And that doesn't mean that they speak both French and English in those regions. The province of Quebec is predominantly French-speaking, with French being the official language and a lot of people only speaking French. This linguistic diversity does add to the cultural richness of the country, but it also presents big challenges for individuals who choose to live in Quebec but are not proficient in French. While it is possible to get by in Quebec with minimal French, non-French speakers will encounter more difficulties in many day-to-day situations, such as accessing government services, finding employment, and integrating into Francophone communities. As a result, the language barrier can make everyday life more difficult and create a sense of exclusion for non-French speakers living in Quebec.